What's happening, people? Shit here, uneven bounce. Hope you guys are well. So as you can see, I'm sat down again with Rajiv Radhakrishnan. How you doing, Rajiv? You okay?
Yes, fine, thank you.
Excellent. We are tonight going for another trip down memory lane. We're going further back, actually, than last time. Last time was Kolkata 2001. Well, actually, the Australian domination kind of era as well. But we're going even further back here. It's 1988. 1993, we're going to be discussing and kind of going through Graeme Gooch's international experiences in England, well, player and captain during that time. Obviously, Rajiv will go into more detail about this over the next hour or so. We'll be discussing Graeme Gooch and the England legend that he was, 8,900 runs, averaging almost 43 in quite a difficult area, you could say, for English cricket, but a bistro man, bistro player. But Rajiv might enlighten us a bit more, actually, over the course of the next, say, 45 minutes to an hour about Gucci himself. Obviously, Rajiv is a lifelong English fan, loves his kind of 80s, 90s English Test cricket, as he can discuss a bit later. But anyway, we'll get into it really, Rajiv. As I like to always say at the start of these videos, the floor is yours. If you want to kind of give some context before we get into the meat and bones of it, really. So yeah, Rajiv, do you want to crack on?
Sure. Thank you, Shay, and thank you for the introduction. And great to be here. And I just before I start, I forwarded these details to a contact of mine, and I'm hoping they forwarded it onto Gower and Gooch. And I hope both of them are watching them, because when you talk about Gooch, you have to talk about Gower and vice versa. But anyway, so 1986, as everyone should know, it was the first time that I sort of got into cricket. I was 7 years old. And the guys around at that time were Gooch, both of them, Gower, Lamb, Gadding. So those were the first five I was introduced to. They became my heroes, out of which Gower was the ultimate hero, and the other four were my secondary heroes. And Graeme Gooch had made his debut in 1975. So it's 1986 now. And you would think, well, that's 11 years, but it actually wasn't. And in 1986, he was 33. So, getting on. He'd been dropped for 3 years after his debut from 75 to 78.
The Rebel Tour.
Sorry?
No, the Rebel Tour.
No. This was dropped.
Oh, the 70s.
Yeah, 75 to 78 he was dropped. And then he was banned from 82 to 85 because of the South African Rebel Tour that he led during the apartheid regime. So come now in 1986, I'm getting into cricket. So he's effectively only played 5 years of international cricket, and he was in the shadow of both of them, Gower and even Gatting. They had all captained England. Graeme still hadn't, even though he was, somewhat older than those three. He was still sort of in and out of the side, and not just because of the Rebel Tours and being dropped. He sort of picked and chose which tours to go on. And in fact, he didn't choose to go on the 86-87 tour. If I remember correctly, his wife was expecting twins. So he took the tour off. Chris Broad took his place. And Chris Broad had an amazing winter down under. And then you come back to 1987, and Gooch was struggling for Essex, which is hard to believe, Graeme Gooch struggling for Essex, but he was that season. And Chris Broad, having had such a successful winter, was now the opener with Bill Appy and then Tim Robinson. And then there was an injury at the end of the summer when the MCC were playing at the Bicentenary Test against the rest of the world. I say test, it wasn't a test match, but it had all the trimmings of such a game. It was first class, obviously. And someone was injured, and Gooch came in, and he actually scored a century in that Bicentenary Test match to commemorate 200 years of the MCC being founded in 1787. And then he went on that tour to Pakistan that winter, fairly successful. But again, he chose not to go on the New Zealand leg. Now, the thought of picking and choosing tours is in that area was probably okay. It wasn't for a while. And now I think we seem to go back to picking and choosing tours because there's so much cricket. I think players are allowed to do it. But anyway, that's another point. And then he went on that tour. Obviously, we all remember it for the Mike Gatting issue. And then 1988 comes around, and you think the winter was pretty torturous for England. It was about to get a lot worse. So 1988, Gooch is now 35. And most people at that age, even if you are a batsman, are thinking, well, you know what? probably got a year left in me. And the series starts against the West Indies with Mike Gatting hanging on by the threads of the captaincy. He gets sacked after the first test because of alleged liaisons with the barmaid, but also on the back of what happened with Shafran. So, yeah, well, that was the reason. John Emburey, vice-captain, takes over for the next 2 tests. Gooch, by the way, is having a very good summer. He scored 140 against the West Indies at Trent Bridge, shared a very good partnership with David Gower, who got 88. And Gooch was in prime form. And he did work very well against the West Indies, which I'll expand upon. So 1988, Emburey is now captain for the second and third test, but come to Headingley, the issue is England don't generally...
Was this the summer of 4 captains?
This was the summer of 4 captains. So we've had 2 now.
There. It was Chris Cowdrey.
Yeah, so Headingley, they don't pick the spinner, so Emburey goes away, and now Cowdrey comes in, and you're thinking, well, Graeme Gooch is still here, but why are they not going for Graeme Gooch? Even Cowdrey is not probably good enough to be in the side. Some say it was because he was the godson of Peter May, the chairman of selectors at the time. So he comes in and captains. I think another reason they probably didn't pick Gooch was that they still weren't sure about his commitment to England. That winter, I think he had another contract with Western Province. He was playing in South Africa then for one of the domestic sides. Anyway, so Cowdrey comes in. England lose again, so it's 3-0 out of 4 tests. But then Cowdrey gets injured before the Oval test. And now, finally, Graeme Gooch, after 13 years since making his test debut at the age of 35 and seeing so many players go ahead of him in the queue to become England captain, he finally gets his chance. And I was actually at that ground at the time. I was at the match. It was my first ever test match. I'd been to ODIs before. And I went and I saw, I don't remember seeing Graeme Gooch bat. I remember seeing Viv Richards get out for a duck. So Gooch's first test, they lost, understandably, against that amazing West Indies side. And it was 4-0. But there was another test match at the end of the summer against Sri Lanka, which they won. And let's be fair, Sri Lanka in 1988 were going to just trouble too many county sides in England. Anyway, the winter now, they're going to India. Gooch is made captain. John Emburey is made vice-captain. But India refused to let them in because of Gooch and Embury's connections with South Africa going on that rebel tour of 1981-82. So the tour is cancelled. Now, in Gooch's autobiography, he understandably is a bit miffed here because they allowed him in 1987 for the World Cup. And now they're not letting him in 1988 as England captain for a test series. So, it's a bit of inconsistency in their policy there. Anyway, so there's no winter tour for England at all. And we come to 1989 now, and it's an Ashes summer at home. And the selectors don't have an England captain. Are they going to stick with Gooch? Are they going to go back to Gatting? Or are they going to bring back Gower? They went for Gower, and we all know what happened. It was absolute disaster. We won't go into that. The memories of that were so painful. So
we covered it in the last podcast, didn't we? You and I did together.
We did cover it, so there's no need for that. Focus on that. So Gower gets sacked at the end of the summer. It's 4-0. And now, to go to the West Indies, England don't actually have a team because they've lost half their side to another South African rebel tour. And they make Gooch captain. He lost it in 88, just after 2 tests, didn't really get much of a go at it. And now they make him captain. And Alan Lamb, who was injured for most of the preceding summer, is made vice-captain, who incidentally has a very good record against the West Indies. So at the time, so Gooch and Lamb are now in charge. They take with them a bunch of youngsters. Botham and Gower were not allowed to tour. The TCCB at the time made it clear to Graeme Gooch that you will not take Gower and Botham. England were looking to change their way of their approach to cricket. And they thought, Botham and Gower, with Gooch there, they'll probably undermine him. Not purposely, but with such big characters as Botham and Gower were, the 1980s were all about them. They wanted a fresh start now, the England authorities, and Graeme Gooch and Alan Lamb were there as only slight remnants of the old era, and with a breath of fresh air with the new guys, Angus Fraser, Devon Malcolm, Alex Stewart, Nazar Hussain, Robin Smith. These were the guys they were taking. Mike Atherton missed out on that tour.
Rabakash came in 89? Not Rabakash, sorry, Hussain. 89, wasn't it?
No, he made his debut in the West Indies on that tour.
Was it 88? Okay, right, okay.
1990, the 89-90 tour.
89, sorry, yeah. You're before the Ashes, 1991, wasn't it?
Yeah, he didn't make it. Atherton had, but yeah. So Hussein and Stewart, in fact, future England captains, made their debut on that Caribbean tour. And what Graeme Gooch did, I'm going to do it from a captaincy perspective and then from his own statistics purpose. Graeme Gooch, when he took over, and I've heard him in interviews, he said that when he first started playing for England, he said there was no preparation. He said you would just turn up on the Wednesday before the Thursday of the Test match. There'd be a quick lunch, a quick pre-match dinner. Everyone says hello to each other. There would be no sort of discussion of tactics. There would be no training program, and you would get straight into the Test match the next day. Then you'd go back and play your county game, and then come back. There was no planning, no thought process, no structure, no approach. And he said when he became England captain, he wanted to change that. And I think we always talk about the reign of Alan Border, Steve Waugh, Clive Royd, Viv Richards. And the reason we do is because all four of them had successful reigns, apart from Alan Border, who the first half wasn't successful. The other three were successful throughout their whole career. Actually, Clive Lloyd maybe at the beginning was a bit hit and miss as well. But generally, very successful, those four captains. We talk about that. But I don't think Graeme Gooch's reign has been given the right amount of coverage as it should do. Because what he did is he changed things which was way ahead of his time. All teams are doing it now. We take it for granted that you have training programs, that you have a structure to follow in the off-season. Not that there is an off-season now. But every player has their own dietary requirements, their own training program, etc. Gooch started all of this in the late 80s with Mickey Stewart. And credit has to be given. As much as David Gower is my hero, Graeme Gooch put these plans in place. So what he did is before that West Indies tour in early 1990, he had a training camp with the England players. And they went up, to Headingley, and they were facing deliveries off 17 yards. The bowlers were made to bowl at that, and the batsmen had to sort of prepare for the bouncers that they would face at 22 yards in the West Indies a few months later. So they were getting all the short stuff at them. Jeff Boycott, I think, was one of the batting coaches there. And England went to the West Indies with no hope. Everyone did not give them a single chance. They'd lost 14 of the last 15 Test matches against the West Indies. The West Indies hadn't lost a series in 10 years. They had four of the quickest fast bowlers. Ambrose was coming through. You had Marshall at his peak. Patterson was there. Bishop. It was probably the last set of that conveyor belt of great West Indian fast bowlers. And England went there and they won the first test in Jamaica against all odds. There was no Gower, no Botham, no Gatting. Gatting was now serving a ban for going on that second South African tour.
Yeah.
So
is that the one that Bill Addy went on? Bill Addy would have gone, and Chris Broad as well. Chris Broad went for the Scott Baggett, he went as well, yeah.
And I just want to say, before that West Indies tour of 89-90, if you look at Graeme Gooch's career, so he'd been playing from 75 to 89, but as you know, 6 of those years he wasn't. He played 73 Test matches and scored 8 Test centuries, and his average was 36, just under 37. So nothing to write home about. And in the 80s, actually, in England, the only person who was averaging over 40 was David Gower. Around the world, Gavaskar, Miandad, Viv Richards, obviously, Alan Border. But others, probably Gordon Greenwich, David Gower, the 40s, Desmond Haynes. And then below that, you've got the Graeme Gooches and the Alan Lambs, etc. So not great statistics, 36, but in that era, it's okay. But it's, for someone like Graeme Gooch, it's way below his potential. So anyway, now the new decade dawns, rather. And so I'm just referring to my notes as well there. He goes to the West Indies, and they win the first Test match. The second Test is rained out in Guyana, and the third Test in Trinidad, they were this close to winning. But Desmond Haynes, who was deputising for Richards, did a lot of time wasting. The rains came, and England so easily could have been up 2-0 after 3 Tests. And it's a real shame that they couldn't just get over that mark. And I think bad sportsmanship cost it. They lost Graeme Gooch for the 4th and 5th Test through injury. Alan Lamb took over, and England had run out of steam. But they came back from the West Indies with their heads held high. Graeme Gooch was now growing in stature. They the whole cricket establishment was sort of saying, well, you know what? Why wasn't he made captain earlier? Everyone praised Graeme Gooch with the way he approached the West Indies, the way he took on with his very young side, the best team in history. And we have to remember that. And they won in Jamaica, one of the greatest victories England has ever had in their history, as far as I'm concerned. So they come now, it's the summer of 1990, and Graeme Gooch, good series. I remember he got out first ball of the series against
Wasn't New Zealand first, wasn't it? New Zealand
was first, yeah.
And then it was India.
Then India. So the first ball England faced, Graeme Gooch got out LBW for a duck. Little did he know what he was going to do for the rest of the summer. And then third test against New Zealand, they won against New Zealand, and in the third test, Gooch got the second test, he got a big 150 odd. And then comes India. So India are now playing the first test at Lord's. David Gower has been recalled, and before the test match, they said David Gower was within, I think it was 10, 15 runs of becoming the highest run scorer at Lord's, and probably beating Jeff Boycott, if I remember correctly, but I'm not sure. So me being a huge David Gower fan, I was so excited to see David Gower come back. The funny thing is, I think he held the record for about 15 minutes because Graeme Gooch decided to score 333 and 123 in that famous match. That
is still the highest, I believe, the highest aggregate of runs at any test match to this date. Simon Cowell's done it as well. Then he did a triple and a century in one test match, but still 456 runs.
Yep, that's correct.
1, 2, 3, 3, 3, 3 wasn't it yet? Still to this date the highest score. And I think he's got 759 runs in 3 test match series.
752.
752. That's still a record, isn't it? As well, I believe. 31 years ago that was.
For a 3-match series, I think it is.
I'm pretty sure it's still a record. That's still a record. Incredible, really. 31 years that stood for.
It was. I think it's so far. 31 years and counting. Yeah. And he is the highest first-class scorer at Lord's as well. He became the first man ever to pass 400 runs in a test match, including both innings. He beat Greg Chappell's 380. And as you said, Sangakkara's got there, Mark Taylor's got there, and Lara got there in one innings, 400. So they're the top 4. But Lara didn't have a second innings yet. So, and I think that partnership, Atherton was out quickly for 8, and Gower came in after spending a year out, being sacked as England captain. He changed county. And that whole partnership between Gower and Gooch on that day, that Thursday, I was 11 years old, I was watching it. I didn't really form this opinion until many years later. And that, to me, was sort of the beginning of that Gooch-Gower drama, because you saw a guy, Graeme Gooch, who started before the Gowers and the Bothams, but had always been in their shadow. Now, he was coming into his own and stepping out of their shadows and showing that he was the alpha male, he was the alpha batsman. It was his time now. And fate played a hand there, because he was dropped on 36 by Kieran Moore, an absolute dolly. And it's amazing how those little things can change your whole career. So Graeme Gooch, you beat David Gower's record, which I think, as I said, had him for about 15 minutes to become the highest run scorer at Lord's. He dominated that partnership with David Gower, and Gower's innings was awful to watch. It was scratchy. He couldn't get bat on ball. It was slow going. It wasn't the usual David Gower. He was unluckily given out for 40. He wasn't out, but some say he should have been LBW earlier for 12. I still remember it, but no Hawkeye or DRS or anything like that in those days. So, and then Gooch just cashed in, and he scored this 333. He had another chance at 306, but I think we can forgive him to 306 to have a chance. And he was finally bowled by Prabhakar after tea on the second day. And remember, at tea time, he went in at 299. I still remember that. So I pretty much watched every ball of that innings. He did it at a very good strike rate. I think he got it in just 300 in about less than 480 deliveries, I think. So very, very good strike rate, even for that time, but especially for that time, rather.
Yeah.
That was the beginning. It wasn't anymore Gower and Gooch. It was now becoming Gooch and Gower. In terms of the alpha male in the dressing room, in terms of the batting power, Gooch was now at the top of the order as captain, and physically at his peak, training really hard. He was only 30. He was now 37, and he's managing to do all of this.
Yeah.
So, and now
when was there falling out there? Would you get to that? Isn't there a falling out between the two of them around this time?
Yeah. So Gower's struggling throughout the series, but he gets a century at the Oval. Gooch takes him to the Ashes that winter. England win the series at home against New Zealand 1-0 and India 1-0. The excellent effort, so close to winning in the West Indies. Everyone's thinking, you know what? Winter to Australia, we've got a real chance of regaining the Ashes after being completely obliterated in 1989. So they go there, and this is when it all starts to fall apart. Gooch gets injured for the first test, and then obviously we know about the David Gower, the aeroplane, and his last shot before lunch at Adelaide. And I think Graeme Gooch was saying, from what I've heard afterwards, is that he just expected more from David Gower to set the example for the youngsters, not to do things like fly aeroplanes across cricket grounds and that poor shot selection at Adelaide. We can laugh about it now. I'm sure Graeme is as well, and I'm sure David is if they're watching it now. We can laugh about it now. But he just expected more. And I think what it is that when, I said this in the other interviews, that when Gower was captain, Gooch did what he was told. Now the roles were reversed. He expected the same, and he didn't get that. So that was the falling out. And they had a poor series, but both Gooch and Gower were top of the averages. Gooch was number 1, Gower was number 2. So batting-wise, those two were still leading from the front. But they come back for the West Indies, and now Gower is dropped. Gooch doesn't want him around. He brings in Ramprakash and Hick, who didn't have a successful summer, nor did they have a successful career, to be honest. But anyway, and now Gooch, having still scored runs, his form is now getting better and better and better. So he's now scored 4 centuries in the last summer in 1990, got an Ashes century, and now it's Headingley, first test against the West Indies. They want to build on what they'd done in the previous winter when they took West Indies 2-1. And Gooch, in that first test at Headingley, in the worst kind of conditions for batting, it was freezing. He scored that amazing 154 not out. I think Wisden rated it as the 3rd greatest innings ever. And now Gooch he was scathing of his players after the winter tour, especially the senior professional who we know. He's got another semi-fresh start. He sticks with Alan Lamb because Alan Lamb's record against the West Indies, but he brings in a few new guys. And a great start to the series, 150. And Gooch, as I said now, the trajectory is going up. The respect for him is going up. People are probably still taking his side over Gower because Gooch had done so much in the last 18 months. They're thinking, you know what, David didn't have to play that shot. He didn't have to do the tie thing. So people are still very much in the Gooch camp now, it seems to be. And it does help the fact that England are now winning as well without David Gower. That's the fact. They won that first test. And they lost, the Lord's test was drawn, and they lost the 3rd and the 4th. And the 5th one, they came back. Ian Botham was recorded, and they won that test match as well. And I think 2-2 against the West Indies in 1991 is something that England team can be very proud of. The team was starting after this to fall into the decline, but it still had Viv Richards, Dujon, Marshall, Ambrose, Richie Richardson, Desmond Haynes. Gordon Greenwich was injured. He was on the tour, but he couldn't play. So, exceptionally good side. And now, with that happening, if you look at, and in fact, just to expand on Gooch's record against the West Indies, he averaged 41. Gower 32. Now I know Gower had to face the West Indies in 1984. Gooch couldn't because of the Rebel Tour, so I don't know how his statistics would have been affected. And Gower didn't play against the West Indies after 1988. So I think we've got to take that into consideration when we say, oh yeah, Gooch's average is 41. Well, Gooch's in 1986 when Gower was captain in the West Indies. Gower had a great series there, and Gooch was abysmal, to be honest. And Gower's average in the West Indies is over 40. No one else has done that in that period, apart from Alan Border. So anyway, so now Gooch is now thinking of the World Cup, and that's going to be held in Australia and New Zealand in 1992. There's the short tour of New Zealand before that. And England get to the final, and again, they lose. And Graeme Gooch has played in 3 World Cups. Each time England got to the final, and each time they lost. And he was captain on the last occasion. So it must have been more heartbreaking for him. But now you're starting to get more sort of news filtering through that Gooch is pushing the players too much, and there's too many injuries coming through. So now there's a slight negative sort of slant on his work ethic. So people like
sorry to interrupt you there, Rajiv. Someone like obviously like Ian Botham, obviously, who was a well-established player at that time, was at the end of his career. How did he kind of fit into the ethos of Gooch's captaincy and kind of how this training regime kind of was drilled in to into his captaincy?
Yeah, Botham found it difficult. He said that in that World Cup of '92, he said players were playing with injuries, they were having injections, etc. We didn't get any time off. And in fact, in Ian Botham's autobiography, he got a humorous account. Well, not for him, actually. He said it was a time when he was captain of one of the Question of Sport teams. For those who don't know, I'm sure all know what Question of Sport is. So Botham was one of the captains, and Gooch was one of the guests in that winter of '91-92. And Gooch had asked him in the pre-programming social function, how's the training going? And Botham had said, in the book, he said, there's a time and a place. I don't need to be asked in a social occasion about my training. And both of them had said, well, you know what? I've been playing for England longer than you, so it's okay. Don't worry about it. And then apparently Gooch had said, well, we can still, and by the way, I'm still in the team at this time. Gooch said, well, we can still see about that. So I think Gooch was becoming very, very obsessive, and both of them was like, why is he asking me about training? It's a social function. And then he's questioning whether, even though I've been in the team, that he can suddenly remove me. I mean, come on. But Gooch was becoming obsessive. This training, pushing. So I think both of them didn't fit into it, along with David Gower. But even some of the other players, like I read Derek Pringle's autobiography. Derek Pringle also found it difficult to cope with the amount of training that Graeme Gooch was doing. But
just before you carry on here, this training thing is very interesting to me, to be honest, because obviously, like I said before, Graeme Gooch retired at age 42, 41, 42, wasn't he?
41, yeah.
He lost a lot of time in his career in the 80s. 70s, obviously, he was dropped, so he lost 3 years being banned. So 6 years was wiped out from 75 to 93, you could say, from this period we're discussing here. Do you feel like maybe with Graeme Gooch, it was a case of like he knew at his age, his body, forward time went to no one, as they always say, especially in the boxing world. And obviously, it touched general sport, isn't it? So was he training so hard because he knew that his body was at an age where it was going to, if he kept, maybe adhered or just kind of bought in or was just basically carried on with the same kind of training standards that were part of the England setup for the previous 10, 15 years as he'd been part of it. He felt like maybe because he was getting older and older, he had to do something to keep himself performing at the highest level, especially being captain. Maybe he was 27, he might not have been so concerned, but the fact he was, mid-30s already, and then maybe it was a reason for him. Obviously, I think it obviously would have helped him with the way his career said before, or with trajectory, because of his fitness levels. Because the reality is, no unhealthy, unfit guy bats for almost 2 days and scores 3-3-3. What was I remember the conditions. It was warm. It was warm. That test match. So you don't do that if you're not got some level of reasonable physical fitness. So my point is, I think the reason that he did it is because he was trying to make up for lost time, and he knew that his age is not on his side, and that's what. But he also wants to bring people along with him. Feel like, you know what, you can almost outperform your ability if you have that physical fitness. In tandem with your obviously innate ability. Does that make sense at all? What I'm saying?
I definitely see that point there. I'll just add to what you're saying, which is a very valid point. I think another thing is that Graeme Gooch didn't come from any wealthy background. He, came from working class. I think he lived in a council flat for most of his younger days. So he had to work that extra hard in order to perhaps to succeed. Playing cricket is not cheap. So I think he took a lot more care and thought and realized that, his family had limited resources. So he had to make the best use of it. And then you compare that to someone like David Gower, who you could almost do it like, take it back 100 years, professional and amateur. You take it back to David Gower, very privileged background, private school, his dad was an Oxford Blue. He's coming from that kind of social status. And for him, it's probably just a game. And I'm not trying to say that David Gower cared less. It may have appeared like that, but he had other things to fall back on if cricket wasn't successful. He was educated. Okay, he left UCL after a year, but he had stuff to fall back on. He had family money that Graeme Gooch, I don't think had that kind of base, and therefore coming back from that working class thing and fighting, not fighting, but playing for a country where it's very much steeped in sort of that private school, Oxford and Cambridge, Eton and Harrow kind of mindset with the MCC, he probably had a lot more to prove. So the people like the boycotts, etc., who didn't come from, affluent backgrounds, probably had perhaps a chip on their shoulder, perhaps, and therefore they treated this as a real profession and to be treated with respect. And again, I'm not trying to say that David Gower didn't, but maybe subconsciously, for him, it was just a game, and he had other options to fall back on, i.e., more money. So that could be part of it as well, I think. But that fitness thing, it became an obsession, and I think why it became even more of an obsession is because he didn't see it happening when he was a player in the England side. And I think that kind of like frustrated him. And he thought, well, you know what? Now I'm captain. I want this. And today the players are pushed to the limit in terms of fitness. They're doing bleep tests. They're wearing these, whatever they're wearing. So that's why I say it was ahead of his time. And I don't think the players or the senior players at the time were really ready for this new change in methodology. But the point is, he was England captain. And if he says you do these things, then you do it. And, at the end of the day, he has success and evidence to show it worked, i.e. he spent nearly 2 days scoring 333.
Yeah, exactly.
He was able to bat out against the West Indies attack and score 150 against the world's best, one of the world's greatest attacks. And just another thing about 333, just one little thing I forgot to mention. If you go to Wisden 1991, which records everything that happened in 1990, a year obviously, the scorecard is actually on page 333 where he got that 333. So that's important to say. And I actually asked Graeme Gooch to sign it in my Wisden collection. So he signed it, and he couldn't believe it was on 3. He didn't know, he forgot. But yeah, so anyway, it goes to West Indies. The World Cup 1992. They get to the final. Gooch's form actually does drop in this tournament, but it's glossed over because they got to the final. And I'll just say another thing, despite all that fitness, Graeme Gooch is actually starting to put on quite a bit of weight now. If you look at the videos, Graeme Gooch is not thin and looking super fit there. So he's got a little bit of a belly when you see him in that 92, but then again, he is now 38, 39 now. Anyway, so 92, they come back to England and they have 2-1 against Pakistan, overshadowed by ball tampering issues. But Gooch, again, bats very well. He brings back David Gower for the third test. Botham and Lamb play their last test at Lord's, the previous test match. Gower comes back, scores a lovely 73, becomes England's leading run-scorer in Test cricket with a glorious extra cover drive for 4 off beat Boycott, off Akib Javed. And he's welcome.
What a plaster pass that is. In a rounded action. I remember Akib Javed.
Yeah, that was the same match that he had an argument with the umpire with the jumper and everything. But anyway, that's another story. And Gooch and Gower seem to be fine. They're getting on, and now people are still, not some I guess are still in the Gooch camp, some are still in the Gower, but it's not like a huge issue. But now it does come to a head because winter tour to India and Sri Lanka, Gooch is still captain. And they've lifted the ban on the South African players who had won on the 1989 tour. It was originally a ban of 5 years, but in 1992, South Africa were welcomed back into international cricket. So they reduced the ban to 3 years, to coincide with South Africa being welcomed back. So Mike Gatting is now eligible 2 years before his sentence finishes. And Gooch picks him and John Embury, who went on both tours, to India, and Gower is left out, and there's a whole pandemonium in England. The MCC call a emergency meeting to say that they have no faith in the selectors. Gower's left out, and now there's definitely a shift, a more pronounced shift that everyone is in the Gower camp. How could they drop him? I remember I was 13 years old and I was going into school, and my English master, my housemaster, everyone saying, how could they drop him? And I'm distraught, 13 years old. Yeah, it's very sad, and I'm starting to dislike Graeme Gooch now. I'm saying, he's taken it too far now, and I'll come back to my relationship with Gooch now. I hope he's watching. They go there and they get absolutely. Sorry.
So do I.
I know. He probably is. I mean, I did tell my contact to tell him. So I'm just getting my notes.
He's not watching live anyway. Maybe in the future he'll watch it. Who knows?
Sorry.
He's not watching live anyway. Maybe he'll watch in the future. I'll try and tag him on Instagram. Never know. Maybe watch a couple of minutes. We can give him a timestamp.
So they go to India, and in fact, just recently on Sky Sports, Mike Atherton did a documentary on that infamous tour. It was a chaotic tour. It went from bad to worse. Not taking Gower, not taking Jack Russell, Richard Blakey, the other wicketkeeper who they took.
Oh, the Yorkshireman.
Yeah, with all due, but having said that, he was averaging like 40 in first-class cricket.
Yeah, he was solid keeper as well for Chip Blakey.
And he just was picked at the wrong time, and people sort of targeted him. He never played again, and I think, I think he had a bit of a rough deal there. But anyway, England went. We had the prawn gate where in Madras or Chennai, as it is known now, Gatting, Robin Smith, and Graeme Gooch all fell foul. Gooch had to pull out of the match. The other two still played. So in Madras, they must have given them a nice hot Tamil spicy curry, and they had to, they couldn't play, and it was made a huge thing. Alex Stewart had to deputise, became captain for the first time. Anyway, so they lost 3-0, trial by spin. Kumble ripped through them. And then they even lost to Sri Lanka for the first time on the tag-on test there. Graeme Gooch took that. Again, Graeme Gooch picking and choosing tours. He didn't want to go to Sri Lanka, want to go Alex Stewart captain that. So they come back now. It's another Ashes summer, and everyone is expecting David Gower to play. But again, Gooch is not picking him. The first test, Mike Gatting is still there. They're picking it. He's doing everything, it seems, to not pick Gower. Graham Thorpe, of course, great batsman Graham Thorpe, he was making his debut. I think Gower cracked a rib just before the Lord's Test, so he was ruled out for that. And then Gooch resigned after the Ashes were surrendered at Headingley. And it was a real shame because if you look at his captaincy record, it was 34 won 10, lost 12. I think that's right. And that last few months really sort of tarnished his reputation as captain. If he had taken Gower, handled that better, I think a lot of things we would remember him as probably one of the finer captains if he hadn't had that issue with David Gower. But David Gower is equal to blame. It was a 50-50 thing. I'm not going to pretend that just because he's my hero that David Gower is innocent. Of course not. But I think that 92-93 period, Gooch could have done a little bit more and welcomed back David and sort of, forgotten about that Ashes. I think Gooch just kind of held that grudge a bit too long. Anyway, so 1993, Graeme Gooch has a fantastic series with the bat. And in fact, I remember at the beginning of that summer, David Gower had 3 national records, England records. He had the highest score in a one-day international, 158. Robin Smith beat that in the Old Trafford ODI against Australia, so he lost that record. And the most runs by an England batsman in a home Ashes series, 732's Gower. Gooch got to 673, and he nearly beat that one, having just overtaken David Gower as the leading run scorer for England. So if he'd beaten that third one, that really would have summed up my whole summer as a 14-year-old. And I remember when Gooch overtook Gower's run aggregate at the Oval. I remember seeing it and thinking, well, okay, he's beaten David Gower's record, but you kept him out of the side, and Wisden recorded it as a bittersweet moment, and that was exactly what I was feeling in Wisden, which would have come out 6 months later. The Almanac in '94 spring sort of said, it was a bittersweet moment. He beat Gower's record, but Gooch as captain, he had allowed Gower to play more. It was a little bit of a strange feeling.
But we said before, Gooch missed 6 years as well in his career. Well, he's dropped obviously, but obviously he's banned for 3 years. So he also missed out.
No, but my point is that he prevented David Gower from playing.
Okay. But you don't think it's to get a personal vendetta, was it, to kind of like on a one-upmanship level to keep him out the side?
No, I don't think it was I don't think it was to become the leading run scorer. Graeme Gooch isn't like that. But I think there was some kind of personal issue with David Gower. He felt easier with David Gower out of the side. I think Gower had a tendency to be quite flippant in team meetings, quite cheeky, and I think he annoyed that on that Australian tour. He was like having tour parties, taking other guests to like wineries and etc. And Gooch wanted him to be focused on the Ashes. So I can sort of understand what Gooch's point is, but I think he held that grudge too long. So I think if both of them just managed to work it out, England's batting order and run making would have been so much better. With Gooch at the peak of his powers, and Gower average never dropped below 40, whether he was 21 or 31. And I think we missed out a lot there because those two couldn't work out a plan. And they get on really well now, which is, hilarious. Sort of, I was being on a podcast where both of them, they're very polite and they get on well. They're not close, I know that, but it's a real shame. But they've overcome it and, they can have a laugh about it now. But Gooch had a fantastic summer 1993. He resigned the captaincy, Atherton takes over. And now that winter tour to the West Indies, Gooch decides not to go. So he's again going back to that picking and choosing. And there was a big question about whether they'll take Gower. They don't in the end. Gower resigns, fine. We'll talk about that later. So Atherton goes, England do okay in the West Indies. They lose 3-1.
3-1, yeah.
But they come back, and all Atherton's...
That was the 3-7-5 series, wasn't it? 3-7-5 Laurel series.
But they come back, and that youth policy of taking the Hussains, the Ramprakases, the Thorpes, and all that is sort of abandoned for a bit. And they bring back Graeme Gooch, who gets a double 100 at Trent Bridge in the first test against New Zealand. And I remember people thinking, Brian Lara, who just scored 375 last week against England, this record is now in threat. Thankfully, he got out for 210 because I think we all wanted Lara to keep that record a bit longer. And that was the last significant contribution Graeme Gooch had with the bat. And after that, remember, he's not captain now. He averaged, I think, 20 for the next 10 test matches and retired in the following Ashes series. And he went with Mike Ganning. They took that. And I think what we want to really look at is, if you look at Graeme Gooch's stats now, I mentioned that from 75 to 89, 73 matches, average of 36, 800s. From 1990 to 1995, 45 matches, 4,000 runs again, 12 centuries, and he's now averaging over 50. 51 he's averaging. And then if we split that stats again from not the time period, but as captain and non-captain, the stats are incredible. 84 matches as non-captain, he averages 35. And as captain in 34 matches, so good sample size here, he's averaging 58. 58.
That's
there
incredible.
is a 23-run difference between him being captain.
Yeah, that's massive. Yeah. Actually, opening batsman, 58 as an opening batsman is absolutely incredible.
Yeah,
that is incredible.
And it's the other way around. The captaincy affects your batting.
Yes, very true. But I think it's really kind of a measure of this kind of steeliness of the man. He mentioned before his background, his more working class background. Was he born in Leytonstone in East London?
Essex, that's right.
Essex, so he was around there. So, like I said before, his grit and determination to kind of like make it as a player. I always thought with Graeme Gooch, he wasn't the most innately talented batsman, personally, but a lot of hard work was thrown into it. You get other players like that. I think I'm trying to think of the top of my head now. I think in the current setup, who's it, or even a last? I would say someone like, I'm trying to think now, who could be comparable with Graeme Gooch, who really excelled just through hard work rather than innate ability.
Well, Alex Stewart, I would say.
Alex Stewart's a good example. I think more of a modern day player, though.
Modern day, with more hard work. I think it's hard to do that comparison because these days you don't see that much Test cricket.
Well, I think Dominic Sibley. I think Dominic Sibley at home anyway. I'd say it's more Rory Burns, these kind of guys. I don't think they're innately talented players. I think it's just down to hard work and perseverance. You know what I mean? So, they're not on the. You can't mention in the same breath Bailey as a Graeme Gooch, but I think their performances are based more on kind of hard work. I would say than innate ability. And I think as before you mentioned about Gooch and Gower is quite sad, really. But I think in every area you've seen in his cricket over the last 50 years, you have a maverick player that's there. Like I talk about Kevin Peterson's very much the same. Now, in regards to the approach to the game, him and Gower are very different. KP was the first one to the nets, the last one leaving the nets every day. He works so hard on his game. That's a guy actually work ethic. If anything, he had innate ability as well. But the reason why Kevin Peterson is, to me, one of the best players ever played for England is because work ethic was coupled with innate ability. But I think you can't control certain. I think a good captain is able to know when to put an arm around the shoulder or leave them alone to get the best out of the ability. And David Gower, if you just simply chalked it to be, I can't control you, you're an established player. If I let you be, and you get and you score infinite amount of runs, then great, I've done my job. But by trying to, England have suffered there a bit. You said mentioned before, what was it? 12 losses as captain, you say? 12 losses up 34? 10 losses?
10, 12. So
a couple a couple of them could become draws or wins if they got more out of Gower.
Yeah, and also those wins also were against the West Indies, a lot of them. So let's not forget that. And I think another thing is that David Gower under that Graeme Gooch, Mickey Stewart regime, I looked at the stats. Gower averaged over 50 in the 10, 11 tests he played under that regime. So there was never a question about his ability. Of course, there's no question about David Gower's ability. But I think what Graeme Gooch said, I saw him at one of the presentations, he said Gower gave everything when he took guard. And he said, I don't have an issue with that. It was everything else that I expected more from him outside, before and after taking guard. What was he doing then? Was he conducive to good team spirit, good team bonding? And I think that probably was the issue. Gooch never questioned David Gower's commitment when he took guard. That's for sure. And both of them, I've looked at, Gower lists the best batsmen he played with, and Gooch lists the best batsmen. They both said each other, which is great. I mean, which just says everything. That there is that respect. It's just that it was a personality clash. But what I don't get also is that the personality clash happened in 1990. They've been playing for a decade before. Mm-hmm. So why it took so long for this to surface is beyond me. They knew. Well,
I think Gooch. I mean, the thing is, obviously, jostling for captain positions, weren't they? Obviously, Gower left. Gooch came as captain, so the status in the team was elevated compared to, for example, 81 Ashes. Yeah. I remember Gooch feeling a short leg in the 81 Ashes as a bit of a nobody, really. He was 28, but he was a bit of the youngster on the side. Do you know what I mean? With a floppy haircut, I remember that in 81. Whereas obviously with the status has been elevated so much compared to 90s previously in 1990, that's why maybe their egos got a bit bigger. They became central parts of the team, and that's why maybe it was more of a clash. Really, came to the fore. Because ultimately, why would Gooch care so much about Gower's approach to the game when he's just simply jostling for a place on the side, just like Gower in the early 80s and the mid 80s? You know what I mean?
Yeah. So, it probably happened because when the leadership roles came about. But I mean, and then after, I just want to. I think Gooch's legacy slightly tarnished towards that end, as I said, in the early 90s, slightly. But I think he does deserve a lot of credit. He has a lot of respect amongst the county players. They said, the way he approached the game, the training, and he was the king of county cricket. If you pick a county side in the history of the county championship, you probably have Gooch opening with Hobbs, I guess. And he carried on playing county cricket till 97, had a fantastic career with Essex. He loved Essex more than anything, probably more than England, I would say. Scored 90 centuries for them. The only blip I would say in this, and I'm being very harsh, is I would have expected him as an opening batsman and as someone who lives for batting to have scored a triple century in the county championship. He got to 275. I find it remarkable that Ramprakash got more than, I think Ramprakash got a 290 and a 300. Hick got a 400 and a 300. I would have expected Gooch to be touching 400. I'm really surprised he didn't get there. He got to 275 in the county championship. So that's being a bit harsh. But then again, 130 centuries, averaging just a shade under 50. I'm glad those stats in the scores he made on those Rebel tours have been counted now as first class, as they ought to be. They were not for a while because of the ICC saying that Rebel tours for South Africa shouldn't count. Well, they are now, which is a great thing. And just to say, on a personal note, I wouldn't say I've got to know Graeme Gooch, but I've seen him at a few events. I love the way he speaks and he talks about the game, and he explains and that he says it. I've seen it a few times. He says this is not just for cricket. This is for life generally. You have to prepare and have an approach to do whatever you want to do in life, and that really resonated with me. With the way he said that he had a plan B. And it was really interesting to listen to him at these presentations. And I've been in a couple. And then at Lord's in 2018, I was by the media stand. And Graeme Gooch was, a few yards away. He looked up, he waved at me. And he actually approached me and came up and shook my hand. He recognized me. And he was so affable, nice. He said, "Nice to meet you." Obviously, he doesn't know my name. I'm hoping he's watching now. He probably recognizes me. And he shook my hand, and then ever since then, obviously 2010 I didn't go to Lord's for obvious reasons, but 2019 when I saw him, again, we always say hello, exchange pleasantries. He's always happy to see me and makes a real effort. And he even made a little joke once saying, I hope he's starting to like me more than David Gow now. And, he has this little banter. It was just brilliant. And I think he really doesn't bring any baggage as a person to the cricket side. He reminds me of like Ian Bell. Okay, apart from the David Gow issue, which was sort of an internal thing, like Ian Bell, he's not going to be flying airplanes across cricket grounds. He's not going to be banned for drugs or harassing nurses or ball tampering or, texting nurses, like I won't mention the names. He's not going to be going for match fixing. He's never going to be called into the ICC referee's room. He doesn't bring anything. He does not bring any baggage to the game. He just goes out there. He wants to bat and score runs and win for England. And he wants to share that knowledge with the younger players. He's desperate to do that. And I think he should be commended for this. He came up with that sort of reference of Daddy Hundreds. And he said, once you get in, cash in. And that's why he made 333, 150, 210, 196. He wants the batsman to develop. And I think it's important that, England aren't using him now. Maybe they just want a fresh approach. They got Ramprakash. That's absolutely fine. But I'm surprised not other counties or schools or even other countries are not employing Graeme Gooch to pass on his knowledge. This guy has scored more runs in all formats of the game in the history of the cricket, more than Jack Hobbs. If you add up the list A, Jack Hobbs wouldn't have played list A because he wasn't around in his time. If you add up list A, T20 and first class, and Gooch wouldn't have played T20. Yeah. But those three formats of the game, Gooch is on about 66,000 over Hobbs is 65,000. People should be making use of this, his knowledge, and I think he's someone who should be considered for a knighthood. People say, oh, well, he went to South Africa. Well, so did Jeff Boycott. Jeff Boycott has been accused, I don't think it's true, of, abuse, domestic abuse. I don't think it's true. But the fact is, he's been found guilty. So if he can get a knighthood, then I think Graeme Gooch should deserve it. And I think we should, really pay our respects to a guy who just turned 68 last week for changing the way England approach the game and how other countries are doing it. And as much as David Gow is my hero, we all know that. I think Graeme Gooch, and also for how affable he is whenever he's in interviews and he meets people. And with me personally, he's been a real gentleman and someone who I always look forward to. And I hope I bump into him again at Lord's this summer when I see India.
Excellent. That's a great way to finish off. I guess you won't be seeing him at Lord's watching any 100 games, will you? Love and Spirit, waving the flag. I saw your video, and actually I was thinking I need to do a video with you on the 100. That was hilarious. And the way you're standing outside Lord's, I thought you were ready to go into the ground to celebrate all the 100 new format, and you ways laid into it. It made me laugh. That's something I would do. That's something I would do. I love the fact, Rajiv, you stay true to your core principles and how you view cricket. You are very much a test purist. T20, IPL, 100, none of this absolute bollocks. It's not for you, is it? None of this nonsense.
And I'll give you and I'll show you why it's absolute rubbish. Is we still talk about today? We still talk about Graeme Gooch's 333. We still talk about his one fight. We still talk about both of Ashes. Does anyone talk about when Chennai Super Kings won the 2000 whatever it was?
Oh, you'd be surprised, man. You would be surprised. Trust me, Richie. The guy Krishna who's commented today, and Abai as well. Really good lads they are. Krishna in particular is a big, massive CSK fan. He's from Bangalore, but he supports Chennai. And trust me, on our WhatsApp group, there's a few Indian lads from India. I'm doing a live stream about the England-India Test Series on Monday. Guys, by the way, if you're watching, 2nd of August, I'm doing that about 7:15 p.m. on here. But trust me, those guys got back in today. Him and Sayan from Kolkata, they were going back and forth about Kolkata versus Chennai from 2016. I swear, 2016, about the fact that Dinesh Karthik can't make any runs anymore. He's so passionate about that. I think that's what the 100. Oh yeah, God, the Indians, they love it. They love the IPL. I like it, but if they really hardcore them lot. Obviously,
we should add Graeme Gooch to this WhatsApp group, and he will explain how to structure an innings and how that innings will count when you need it most, and you're on a 5th day and you're up against it, and you have to bat out time or score runs to win a match. then that's when you'll need someone of Graeme Gooch's stature and caliber. You're not going to get that in bloody IPL.
Fair enough. That's a wonderful way to end this segment. Another great video. I really genuinely enjoyed this, Rajiv. I think I know a little bit about English cricket over the last 30, 40 years, but I've really learned a lot today. You really do know your stuff in this area, don't you, man? So I've really enjoyed today. I'm going to post it on our Facebook forum with 1,000 people, because I think this is a video actually worth sharing, and I think people really enjoy this. English fans, maybe our age, possibly a little bit older, I think we'll really enjoy this video today, because you've given a lot of good insight, Rajiv, really good insight to Graeme Gooch's career in that 10 period of 86 to 93, 80 to 93. But anyway, yeah, cool. All right, Rajiv. Until next time, I mean, before we go, actually, do you want to quickly just mention your book? Just very quickly about the book I know we mentioned it before, but obviously you could have new viewers watching the show today.
I'll just get the copy there. So geez, if you can see that, life in cricket. I chose 1986. That's when I remember. And I thought 2019 I was going to turn 40, and it was the World Cup, so I thought that was a good sort of collection to have. 33 years, and I privately published it. I sent a copy to Wisden, and they put it in their Wisden book review section. So look in 2021 Wisden. And just while we're here, I'm just going to show you this. Wisden, we touched upon it before. I mentioned it before. So this is Wisden 1991. And if I go to page 333, you can just about see it. That's the scorecard. I don't know if you can actually. There we go. Scorecard, England. No, that's 331. Sorry. Page 333. England versus India. That's when Gooch got his 333. And it's on page 33. And Graeme Gooch has signed it there for me. There you go.
Amazing. For the Cornhill test at that, amazing. Yeah, love it. Yeah, the theme tune. I think Cornhill test. I think Tony Lewis. I think that BBC intro. Amazing. They were the days, man. They were the days.
Yeah. BBC.
Anyway. Absolutely. Guys, enjoy the content. Please like, comment, subscribe. That'd be amazing. Look up some more streams with Rajiv in the coming weeks and months. So I'm sure we've got lots more we can discuss. And yeah, I'll hopefully catch you guys on the next one. Once again, thank you to Rajiv for coming on. And hopefully I'll catch you again soon.
Brilliant. Thanks, guys. Cool. Thank you.
Cheers. Thank you very much. Thanks. Cheers. Bye-bye.